So my methodology with two-sword basically boils down to the fact that I want to win tournaments. I don't care too much about winning like large bouts of sparring. It's a lot of fun. You can learn a lot that way, but it's a totally different method of fighting. I think Brennon will follow suit with me that I would much rather fight safely and consistently than like explosively and sporadically and lose when I don't want to lose. It's always better, in my opinion, to be safe than unsafe and like reaching for things. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about is first how you keep yourself safe, and then second how you capitalize on things while you keep yourself safe. So first thing I'm going to talk about that's going to help you a lot with that is your feet, right? Now when you're fighting two-sword on two-sword, what I generally try to do is I try to hand match their forward foot, okay? So if Brennon and I are fighting, and he lines up there with his left foot forward, or right foot forward, sorry, I'm gonna put my left foot forward, right? So I'm always gonna want to be hand matching. Now the reason for that is that if we're hand matching,
slide this camera in right here. Sorry.
The closest thing to hit on somebody while you're hand matching is just outside chop, right? So in order for me to hit out here, he can hit the inside here, right? Right? Mm-hmm. And vice versa. Right? Mm-hmm. Now, in order for me to hit his body, I have to travel in to here to hit body, okay? Now, if I'm fighting right on right, the closest thing for me to hit is his inside arm, okay? Which means he can also hit my inside arm. Now, in order to hit outside arm, I have to get a little bit closer. Now I can hit outside arm. He can hit outside arm. In order to hit body, I have to get even then a little bit closer. And now I can hit body, right? And he can hit my body. So the difference between my closest thing to attack is two small steps, like two 1-inch steps to hit body, right? Versus when we're here, and the difference is like a 4 to 5-inch step to hit body. Okay, so that's the first thing. The other thing is that it's going to stop his forward hand from stabbing me more than if we're like this. If we're like this, it's much easier for him to stab me because my body, of course, is perpendicular to the stab, right, of the forward hand. He can still stab me with the backhand when we're like this and get those things, but he's going to have to reach his shoulder around so I have more time to react and to do something about it. So I'm protecting myself against the stab. I'm also protecting my body, right? And if his backhand, is the threat of the stab, by lining up this way, not only have I brought my body further away from that danger, that allows me to then fight like a forward hand a little bit easier because that hand is less of a threat. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So that's basic feet. Now you'll run into a lot of people that'll switch their feet a lot. They'll be like, so if you've got somebody that's doing that, that's like, thinks they know what they're, messing with and stuff, and they like to switch their feet because they think they're messing you up, then just put your dominant foot forward, your dominant hand forward, and just say, all right, go fuck yourself. I'm going to keep this foot forward, right? And I'm going to play on my terms instead of yours. Now, generally, once I've established, and if it's somebody I fight a lot, like, say I fight Belfield a fair amount, and I know he is right-handed. His left hand is passable, but it's definitely not his right hand. So I'm almost always going to hand match that hand because that's the dangerous hand, right? Okay. Even if he lines himself up with his other foot forward. Brennon, both of his hands are extremely dangerous, but his right hand is better than his left hand. And so for the most part, I will hand match his right hand, even if he's lined up like this. Okay? So you'll have to learn how to fight both ways, whether you're doing opposite foot forward or hand match foot forward. But as a general rule, I try to hand match the foot forward. Do you have any questions on that before I go on? Makes sense though, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, okay. So I like to talk about win conditions. Okay? Now how you win in this game is by not getting hit. Right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And not getting defeat either.
Yeah. That's how you win. So the object of the game is to win, and how you win is to not get hit. Right? So it doesn't really matter how long it takes for me to hit him, or for me to not get hit by him. The more I can make him like reach around my guards and things and do things that make him easier to hit, the better off I'll be. So as a general rule, I try to put my shit in between his shit and my body. So I'm not going to have, if he's got this hand forward like this, I'm not going to have my hand up here like this. Right? It's stupid. I'm going to have my hand in front of his shit like this. If I throw a shot for his arm, I'm going to keep my hand in front of his hand. Right? If I throw a shot, my hand's in between him and me. Like even if I go back body, you know, my hand is in between him and me. If I go outside, my hand is between him and me. Okay? You can throw these things like that, you know, where my hand is no longer in between me and him and I die for it. You can do those things, but you got to understand the consequences. So as a general rule, as a basis, how we're going to kind of structure and build up what we're doing, we're going to look at how to keep our hand in between them and me when we throw a shot. And the easiest way to do that is in single sword. Right? So there's a couple easy shots you can throw. You can throw an outside shot, where this is like, a lot of people have different names for it. I call them just kind of like an open reverse, but you're basically like throwing a reverse wrap, but it's up high and over top. And all it is a chop where you turn your palm up. So I'm just going like this and turn my palm up. It's not this, which is what everyone seems to think that it is. It's just, that's all it is. Okay? So I'll throw that to the outside a fair amount, or just a standard chop, where I kind of turn my hand flat and keep my hand in between him and me. It's a little more dangerous because my hand gets a little bit further out of the way, but it's still pretty safe. And then you have inside shots where the same sort of thing, where you throw like down arm here, or like a crossbody arm with your hand still in the way, or back body, you know, my hand is in the way. I like these flat shots a lot. They have funny range though, so be careful when you throw them. But, so what I'd like for you guys to do is, before we progress, I want you guys to find a single sword partner, and I want you to fight some single sword, and I want you to look, and don't even really fight fast, but just look at like some basic swings that you can throw, and be like, oh gosh, like, when I'm normally fighting, like, my hand's like way out here or way out here, you know, just watch what you're doing, and then really try to concentrate on keeping your hand in between you and them. Okay? Okay, so that's a valuable lesson, right? In order to survive and stay safe all the time, it's actually harder to hit them, okay? So now, while we're doing this, we need to, you know, especially with two-sword on two-sword, you find ways to keep your hands in between them and you, and, you know, still have an easy access to hitting them. A lot of that's going to come from your feet, a lot of that's going to come from your hand position and where you get them to reach for, right? So if you add another sword in the mix, all right, so if we add another sword in the mix, so the goal, like I've said, is you get these win conditions where you can, you know, get to these locations and you basically have yourself covered, right? And that usually happens after they swing at you, right? So for instance, if he swings outside at me, right? Now he's moved his hand away, so I can keep my hand in between this weapon and me, and I can keep this hand in between that weapon and me, and I have a free shot here. Now, this hand is still in the way of that weapon. That's because he swung in an unsafe way. Right? So, if, going back to what we were doing single sword, if I throw in a manner that gets him, because my weapon is still in between me and them, in a manner in which makes them want to go around your hand, right? So you keep your hand in between you and them, and then you swing so they have to go around it, you get these situations. Right? Okay. Firstly, you know, like if I throw outside here, you know, and he wants to come down arm, now my hand is in between me and him. When he swung down my arm, and this hand is between them and, you know, that hand and me, and I have, you know, something that I can come out here to, right? Or I can come here because this hand's still in the way. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Geometry.
Yeah. But this all stems from the fact that when I opened, not only am I super concerned about hitting them, but I keep my stuff in the way to get them to reach for something, whether it's around or try to go through you, or, you know, any way thereabouts. So a lot of this comes back to your feet though, because if I allow them to move more than I'm moving, if I allow them to close on me more than, you know, I'm comfortable with, if he can poke me in the body, you know, a lot of this kind of goes out the window because it's very hard to keep your hands in between you and them if they have a threat of a poke on you, because they can. It's really easy to manipulate somebody's guard by going like this to them all day. And if that's a true threat, then, you know, the way to get rid of that threat is stay far enough away so you can't poke me, and you can only fight my arms. Because in theory, if we're fighting like this and this is the only arm I put forward, even if he's got two swords, right? This is the only arm I need to worry about defending because this stuff's too far away, right? When I bring this weapon back up into the mix, now he can reach this arm. So I need to worry about defending it, right? So I have easier access to this arm, and I have some access to this arm because he's brought it forward, right? So you can do things to, you know, bring him out to you, right? Or you can fake to things to give you access to other areas, but then this hand's job, once this hand swings, is to keep this hand safe, right? So if I go like this and this hand's out of the way, I can catch that block, great. But now if this hand's not in the way, he's going to take my arm. Okay. This hand needs to be in the way, because this one's in the way of that one and this one, right? You will get these situations where you've really like screwed somebody up real bad, and you have like a complete free action with one hand, and those are like really satisfying things to do, but they're kind of harder to get to. So, and generally, if you have a total free action with one of your hands, they have a total free action with their hand. The biggest instance of this is if I have one hand in between both of his weapons and me, and so I have free action with this hand. In theory, then he has free action with that hand, right? Okay, because this hand has to defend that. Now I lose my protection here. So these times where you get free action with one hand completely is if they do things like, so say he, you know, you convince him to stab at you, but you're far enough away that you can block it down with this hand. Now that hand's, you know, not really in the mix to fight, and you have total free action with this hand. But again, you've gotten there because you've gotten them to reach for it, right? Any questions or comments on that? Anything to add?
Yeah, so I actually like to create opportunities where I can trap both of their weapons with one hand, and I'll do it specifically by essentially taking this entirely out of the equation, because if it's kind of out of sight, out of mind to a certain degree, if it's out of combat, most people stop thinking about it. So I'll square off like this, and I'll go something like this, and now they're not worried about it. And if I can get them to attempt to attack my forearm with both weapons in rapid succession, well, I'll try and force them to throw both to the outside, because some people do that. Like one will throw high and then one will throw low.
Yeah.
If I can get them to do it right, I can catch both of these and then step and hit them. And it shouldn't work because it's dumb and obviously stupid, but especially against mid-tier and lower-end people, just moving your sword back and forth like this will get them to swing both swords at one arm, and then you just do a sweep and hit them. Kind of embarrassing.
Right, and if you look like down my body when he moved my swords that way with this hand, like look where he put that hand, this hand here. So he's got the tip of my sword here. So for me to get to him with this sword, I have to come under and around. In order for me to get to him with this hand, his hand is actually like in direct line with my arm, right? So he's got this one actually covered. This hand just happens to be here.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So that's why that works.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that you can't just stand here. If you're going to make this work, the big part about that makes this work is immediately as soon as both swords are across, there's a step. And I'm stepping into it, which prevents him from pulling back. And then I'm just going to stay on him until he dies. Like, because at this point, if I disengage, he gets to hit me with one of those swords.
And the other thing too is that, go back to where they were before. Now, in theory, right, I have free action with this hand as soon as he starts swinging with this hand, right? So in theory, I could come here. With his step, he moves his body further away from that arm.
Yeah. I'm stepping, I'm rotating, and it's like a compound action. I'm moving away from the angles. I'm moving into the angles I have blocked. I'm creating sort of a lead for myself. And then I'm actively moving my target areas away from his ability to strike me. So I'm doing like 3 kind of small things that individually wouldn't be successful, but added together, they're pretty effective.
All right. Any questions? Is that mind-blowing, or you guys like, yeah, it makes sense. All right, well, go practice it. Go give it a shot. See if you can do that. All right? But remember, you're going to achieve these things not because you open like this, right? Now I've got to defend that hand with this hand, and now this hand has free action. I've given that to him.
And we're still trying to block with the lead leg. Okay.
Yep, you're still hand matching.
You're trying to create opportunities for one of your hands to act, right?
Right.
Okay.
That's the drill.
Yep. Getting those opportunities is not exactly easy, right? And it's really, really easy to just be like, fuck it, I'm gonna hit him, right? So there's a couple things that we can do. Kind of like, basically, I'll give you guys a little bit of a cheat sheet to go through so you can have a place to start from. But first thing I want to do before I do that is something I noticed with your guys' feet. A lot of you guys are lining up. So if Brennan and I are going to line up to fight, you know, just like getting an actual, like where you're going to put your feet. Okay. Now, look at where his feet are in comparison to where his shoulders are, how he's holding his shoulders towards me. His chest is mostly turned towards me, right? It is slightly turned away from me, like to correspond with his hips, right? But for the most part, this shoulder is, what, 3 inches back from this shoulder? So this hand is actively a part of the fight. If he moves this shoulder back and fights me like this, what the fuck do you think that hand is going to be able to do? Right? So, if you also look at his feet, they're not ridiculously wide. They're a little bit wider than I put my feet, but they're not much wider than his shoulders. You guys who are fighting like this, you can't move anywhere. When you take a step, you move your core, right? When I take a step, I move my core someplace. It doesn't really matter like how far my foot goes when I take a step, right? My core only moves so far. So if this is where my center of mass is, my core, and my feet are starting to fight this far apart, and I go to take a step, I can move myself this far because my legs are only so long. If my feet are this close and I take a step, I move my core this far, and I didn't even move it as ridiculously far as I did before, right? That's like twice the distance, right? So your legs are only so long. So if you're having a hard time getting to people, it's probably because your legs are this far apart to start to fight. And you're all like, you know, you want to keep your legs, I try to keep my heels about in line with my shoulders. Some people like them a little bit more, and that's fine. But as a general rule, much past that, you're going to have a hard time getting to people, and you're going to have a hard time actually engaging, reaching people's bodies or reaching people's arms, and they can just stay away from you and kill you at leisure. But the thing I want to stress too is, like I said, this shoulder is actively engaged, right? Now, depending on the fight that I'm in, you know, like I bring this foot up even a little bit closer because, you know, I'm almost just like squared off with him like I'm some kind of Muay Thai fighter or something. But I try to keep both of my hands engaged in the fight as much as I can, and so I try to bring this back foot as far forward as I'm comfortable with bringing it. The further forward I bring it, the more susceptible to getting the dog shit stabbed out of me I am. So it's kind of an evil trade-off. The more engaged this hand is, the more you need to worry about being stabbed, because the less the hand matched advantage goes for you. So you kind of find this like delicate balance between where you're comfortable and how well you can defend yourself in a hand match situation versus how much you want to bring that foot forward to engage this arm. Does that make sense?
And some of it's just knowing your opponent. If I'm fighting someone who stabs a lot, I end up turning more. If I'm fighting someone who does not stab at all, fight them almost square. Why not?
Yeah. Yep. Yep. So, a little bit of a cheat sheet to start with, okay? Now, to get these great opportunities, like to mess with people, there's a couple real basic openers that I throw a considerable amount that get me those opportunities. And most of them have to do with just giving somebody the illusion that I'm throwing something unsafe so that they return to it. Now, if you do something that's unsafe, the more unsafe something is, the more certain the return is going to be, right? So if you do this, it's extremely certain that he's going to hit me in the arm. If I do this, the return is much less certain.
Yeah, I wouldn't go for that.
Yeah, see, he wouldn't even go, and like I gotta make it more and more unsafe.
You seem like frothing.
But do you see what my point?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so you can do things that seem to be unsafe. You know, like for instance, one that I'll do a fair amount is, you know, we're lined up like this, and I'll try to convince him to throw with that hand onto my right arm. and I'll throw at his hand like this, right? And a lot of people will be like, oh shit, that's my time, you know, I'm gonna do this and you do that, and then you poke him for it.
That's cool.
Okay. Another one that I'll do a fair amount is I will throw outside his hand and like hit his hand going past, and then I will stab him for it. Yeah?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to do both of those again kind of in slow motion. So remember, with the inside of the hand, to protect yourself, and you poke him, or, right?
Poke.
You make
It
it
looks
look so
really
easy.
easy when you do it.
Yeah, you make it look so easy.
Right? Is there any that you really like?
Brennon must be really easy to kill.
I don't know that Aaron has ever stabbed me.
It's not stab you in that arm really hard that one time.
Oh, okay.
That one
Are
time.
you stabbed me once?
And it was actually with this. We were fighting two sword, and I had my right foot forward, and I went like this, and he swung at my arm, and I was like, BAM! He was like, ow, fuck!
Was your sword tipped out or something?
No.
That's a good stab.
No, I just stabbed the dog shit out of you. I tried to stab you in the body, and you were like, no!
I like that that's notable enough that he remembers. So just real quick about what he's saying. You can stab. You can also just do the same thing but chop to the form, which is what I tend to do because I feel like it's a little bit less committee. I have commitment fears, so you know. But like if I'm throwing to the outside and trying to get him to respond to my arm, I'll just do that and then pop rather than go for the stab. They're both completely valid. It just depends what you want to do.
Can you do that one more time?
I'll throw to the outside.
It's the same thing as I did, except
Yeah,
I
instead of a
stabbed
stab,
him.
It's a full circle, yeah.
drop it down. It's, yeah, you could actually just do it as a circle.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
But
And
the-
actually, at that point, it doesn't even matter if he does anything.
Right? But the important thing is he keeps his hand in the way, whether he's chopping my arm or whether
Yeah,
whether
like
it's a stab.
Here, drop.
Yeah, hand is in the way. Even if he stabs, notice how his hand goes up and stays in the way.
Yeah.
And has he ever hit you in the arm?
Oh yeah, we'll
Oh, okay. Once.
more than once.
So what I was showing the group of guys I was working with is based off the principle that the hand that you hit is often the hand that they want to throw with.
Mhm.
So I'll create opportunities where I want them to throw cross. A lot of my fighting game in general is convincing my opponent to do stupid things. And one of the stupider things you can do is throw cross. Like if you just throw cross into someone's guard, you probably deserve to die. So if I'm scored off like this, I'll just pop them in the hand in an effort to get them to do that, and then just push forward.
Yep.
And I like it because it's simple. It doesn't require a whole lot of good timing. It doesn't require you to do anything particularly tricky. And it just plays off the principle of something they want to do anyways, which is they want to hit you with their dominant hand and your dominant hand, right? So that's nice and easy, and it tends to work for me very well.
Yeah. And that's actually really like a similar premise to this one where I was throwing the inside of his hand.
Yeah.
It's just you put this hand in a different place. I put this hand here, right? Which, because it's on the outside of that hand, they're like, oh, I've got both my weapons in between me and them, right? So then for whatever reason, people reach with this hand.
Yeah.
That happens a lot, okay? Just try not to do that. You know, when people do that to you, like if in a fight, and also what's important, when he does that to somebody, he stays as far away as he possibly can.
Yeah.
Because if he does that to me and I don't hit him with this hand, I better hope I only have shorts in my suitcase. So I'll probably hang myself. Right? But it's, you know, he does it also in a way that you do it in a way so that that hand is still able to come back around in case this comes. You know, that hand can just easily raise up and defend himself against this hand.
Yeah.
It's important to stay safe.
And I'll actually, when I throw for there, if I think I can really get them to commit to it, like I've got this in my blocking zone where it needs to be anyways, and I'm really just popping their hand. There is no chance of me hitting them. I'm going to hit their hand, I'm not going to hit their forearm, it's not something that's going to wound them, because I'm not willing to reach far enough to do that, right? It's literally just, hey, do you feel like throwing at my hand? Hey, do you feel like throwing at my hand? Oh, you do. Thank you. It's not a threat, it just feels threatening, and it feels like there might be an opening for them to respond to.
Stabs are also your friend. Threatening a stab is definitely your friend. It's really easy to move somebody's gear around by going like this and like thinking you're going to poke them. It's really, so if somebody's got their hand in like a good, you know, in a good guard, and you want to move it out of the way, you know, like show them like you're gonna stab them, right? So I show them that motion, you know, then it's a really easy thing for me to throw to this inside wrist, you know, which puts this hand in a really safe spot. So now he's got a decision to make, either engage or wait for something better, right? If I do it in a way that's enticing enough for him to come outside, you know, now I've done it, right? And so sometimes people will see through your setups a lot more if you just throw it. And they're like, that doesn't look as tasty. But if you're like, and then you go, because they're like, oh fuck, I'm gonna get stabbed, oh, I can swing, right? And then, you know, you basically, you put more things on their mind's plate to process before, you know, then that you can take advantage of. But these like little circular like stabbing motions, they're really, really good. You know, you can get someone to go from like outside to inside, so you can throw their arm, and while keeping your hand in the way the whole time. And you can do the same with this hand. You know, that's a really common one. You'll see a lot of people, especially if you show them a stab like towards their dominant side, a lot of people will like, this hand will come screaming down like to defend themselves, and then you're like, right? So with either hand you can threaten stab very easily and very safely. I'm not really in a place where I can stab Brennon at this range into his body, but it sure looks like I can stab him, especially to him, right? You know what I mean? So you can threaten that from a lot further away. So even if we're here and I make that approach, you know, it's a really easy thing to show him that stab. Now, the more experienced of a fighter you're fighting against, the easier, the less you have to show him for him to identify that he's going to get stabbed and for him to move his hands. Some people, you know, if you go to a park that has a lot less experience or a lot less stick skill, I mean, sometimes you really got to be like to get them to move their hand. Otherwise, they'll just go and they'll hit you. You feel real dumb. They're like an action figure. They can care less what you do. So threatening a stab is really your friend. And to make stabs very threatening is to stab them. Okay?
Alright.
It's true.
Makes sense.
So there's like really simple stabs. That's kind of why I showed you those two stabs, is because if I've stabbed him a couple times, or if I stab someone fighting a couple times, then they're really scared of getting stabbed. And then you can really start manipulating, moving their hands around. Another really simple stab that I'll throw is I'll show them like an understab, and then as soon as my stab like registers them, they start to bring their hand down, I'll just bring the tip of my sword up and throw to the forearm. Okay? It's really, you know, that's all it is. But it's not this or this. It's just show them the stab, bring your hand up. So you let the tip of the sword guide it. It's like, that's it. Okay? Firstly, with this hand, you can do the same thing. You can threaten stab. If they move that hand, you can chop with this hand. Right? If they bring that hand down and bring it like into the fight, you know, then you can chop them, or you can just poke them anyway. Right? Any other easy ones you can think of?
Those are the basic ones. Again, anytime you can get them to throw cross.
Yeah.
So anything that you can do that makes them put both of their swords on one side, you can trade off one of your swords for both of theirs. Those are good opportunities. Those are sort of my bread and butter. Also, anytime you can have two swords in the fight and they can only have one sword in the fight is functionally the same thing. Exactly. So if he's over there, he's only fighting one of my swords at this point. No, he's got an advantage. All he has to do is take that sword and put it on this sword, and now I'm kind of fucked, right? So it's the same thing, but instead of getting someone to throw cross and therefore take both of their swords out of the fight with one of yours, you're just moving around them to the point where you have two swords, but their sword is off in La La Land somewhere.
Yeah. There's a couple simple ways to do that to people. Is one of them, get them to throw cross. You're like, and then as soon as they go like that, then you step. Okay? You've one, moved yourself further away from danger. And two, you know, now that hand is nowhere near anything, and you can easily control this weapon. But this one you have free action. Right? When people aggress on you, especially if they're trying to stab you. It's, you move away into the outside. It creates a really good opportunity. A lot of people will try to stab you with their arm by doing this. And when you stab somebody, you want to stab them with your feet. Your arm's going to stay the same, and you're going to stab them with your feet, and you're moving by moving your core. When you start stabbing people like this, that's how you like really hurt yourself and other people. So, figuring out ways to get those good steps. They usually involve, like I said, them stepping straight forward at you. You create a good opportunity. Or getting them to commit and throw across. If they turn that shoulder towards this side of my body, it's really easy. All right, now, why I generally step this way instead of this way, well, you can step this way too, but why I generally step this way is because A, it makes them have to turn this foot to the outside, which is a little bit harder to do than turning that foot to the inside. Okay? Because everything's pivotal off this forward hip. Now, if he had a shield in that hand, and they're fighting like back foot forward or something, then I will, generally step like towards the back foot, or towards the back foot, because it's much harder for them to pivot around to that point because they got to move their back foot like further back, which is a harder thing to do, stepping that way than stepping forward with that foot. But two sword on two sword, I'll generally go towards my hand match side. Move towards that hand match side. Move my body further away from their backhand.
Yeah, and it's also, I do largely the same thing. My reasoning for it is a little bit different, which is that most people are most comfortable attacking with their dominant hand, and that's the one that they're programmed to use in Florentine. And therefore, if I move towards their offhand, they might accidentally throw with it anyways. If I move towards their dominant hand, they're guaranteed to forget they have an offhand. So now it's two sword on one sword, and I've moved my dominant hand towards their dominant hand. That's great, because I'm going to remember that I have an offhand. So while our dominant hands are fighting and fucking off, I hit them. Victory! It's really not complicated. Clever application of stupidity.
Yeah. Any questions? All right, give it a try. Different partners. So a lot of fighting is going to revolve around you find the tolerance at which you can move your guard out and move your guard in and kind of adjust to what people you're fighting are doing. And there'll be breaking points where you'll be like, oh well, you got me on the outside, my hand was too far in, right? And so you cheated out a little bit more until you kind of find that balance of where you need to put your hands, especially against somebody like him that's going to be that little bit different fight than the average.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always going to be exceptions to the rules. As a general rule, I try to keep my hands 10 inches apart. But sometimes that rule has to get broken because you're fighting somebody who just comes screaming in on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
When they're swinging with both hands at the same time, you can't. It's hard to block them with your hands this close if you're not far enough away.
Mm-hmm.
So you do what you got to do sometimes.
And a corollary to that is that it's good to have a set of tools to work people in a variety of different positions. So if I'm fighting Peter, if I'm fighting Peter and he's got a really good inside stab defense, which he currently has, right? And I would really like to stab him, but he's clearly set up against that. Instead of opening up with stabs or trying to work my stabs in, which is clearly what he's prepared for, I'll instead do things like I'll work his outside, right? And I'll convince him that this is just a threat and this is how I'm fighting now. And then you work into the stab. So you convince him that he needs to fight on the outside because that's where the shots are going. And you do it by throwing safe shots repeatedly, right? And then once he does that and that stops working and you stop being able to get him on the outside because he adjusts his guard, then you do stuff to the inside. And eventually he brings his guard back in and you just repeat. You just move people through a cycle.
You go back to the outside. That's kind of as we talked when we were talking about stabbing. In order to give somebody the threat of stabs, you got to stab them. It's the same sort of thing. You make them feel threatened on the outside, they're going to bring their hands out. You make them feel threatened on the inside, they're gonna bring their hands in. And then as you move their guard around, when you're doing it on purpose, you basically got to figure out the next step, like where do I go from here? All right, now I've moved them here, where am I gonna go? Right.
Go ahead.
No, and then what's the next step after that?
When we talk about being in control of the fight, that's what we mean. So that you're actively controlling their responses to a plan that you have so that you can take advantage of the situation. And it's not necessarily over just one fight, and this especially applies to tournament fighting where you're going to be fighting that person all day through brackets, or you're going to be doing best 2 out of 3 or whatnot. You really want to set them up in a situation where over the course of the match or over the course of the day, you're dictating how they're going to respond. So it's not really getting in their head, like it's not manipulating how they're feeling or anything like that. It's literally just teaching them that these are the things that you do, and then when it's inconvenient for them, you change the things that you're doing.
Any other things that people notice? Comments? Questions?
That fake to the stab fucked me up. It's good shit.
The what?
The fake to the stab fucked me up. It's good shit. I can't fall for it.
Yeah. All right. Anything else?
More general question. So
Yeah.
you got 2 high-level fighters. Both of them are controlling the fight. Both of them are walking up or leaving the fight when it's not going according to their plan. How do you figure out who wins?
I have some footage at Keep you can watch.
Yeah, 30 minutes of.
No, so if you get 2 people that are really, really dedicated to only fighting on their terms, you find a lot of jockeying for position physically across distance, and then you get Sponge breaking the ring.
Exactly what I was talking
And you're
about.
like, I had an entire plan there, Sponge. Thanks for that, asshole. But no, it literally comes down to, at that point, convincing them that you have made a mistake. You have to, and it's not going to be, like if I'm fighting Peter and we're seriously in a tournament and he really wants to win and I really want to win, and I do something like I step in and I drop my guard, he's not going to swing at me. It's too obvious. It's not the kind of fuck up I make. What I've got to do is I've got to let him think that one of the plans that he's doing is working, and I have to do it gradually and convincingly. So, like, one of the things that I will do when I'm fighting someone high level and I want to sucker them in, is if I'll get them to try and close distance on me, and I'll back up, and then I'll get them to try and close again, and I'll back up, but I'll back up slightly less than I did the first time, and then I'll do it again, and back up slightly less, and now they're a little bit closer, so they think that they're making progress, but they don't realize how much closer they are. And then when they back up, or I'll start to come back again, and as they come forward, I'll switch and I'll come forward. So their goal is to close distance on me, but my goal is to get them comfortable with closing distance on me so I can counter press.
So does it come down to who makes the fewer millimeters of mistake?
Yeah.
Sometimes.
It comes out to the person that's actually controlling the fight, making the other person think that they're in control of the fight.
Got it.
When you've got two very high level, very controlling fighters, very reactive fighters. And we say reactive in the sense of, I want you to throw the first shot, not I'm letting you set the pace.
Yeah. And there's you got to have different methods to fight different types of people. Sure. There are people that are incredibly good, but they're really, really good at what they do, and they're really good at making other people fall into those traps and do those things for them. And then there's other people who are really, really good at the second we come close enough to the fight, we analyze what options we have and what we want to do and where we're going, and you have this like instant problem solving. And there's some people who are extremely good at that. So you got to kind of be aware on the high end, what you're dealing with, right? Like for instance, my fight at Keep against Lanky, right? Like he's really good at staying far away and like picking at your legs or picking at your arms. And outside of that, he doesn't have much that he's going to do because he's really good at that. He's good enough to that to get to the finals. So, you manipulate that. Like what I did basically was I made him continue to reach and continue to reach and reach a little bit further and a little bit further until I could kill him for it. Right?
Sometimes.
But yeah, it's always a game. You know, that's why we do it. You know, 'cause we just love that. We love that problem solving. At least I do.
So like if you're in a place where like you're able to like block and you go to return, but their hand is already in a safe position,
Mm-hmm.
like how can you get them in a position where you can block and return, like that's in a way that's advantageous to you?
Like if they're playing the same game, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, you know, we run into that quite a bit, but basically it's whoever ends up being more stubborn. You know, once somebody starts reaching further outside or further inside and further out of lane, you know, you can usually make them pay for it. But you got to be on your game because they might come a little bit further than you think that they will, right? And then they hit you. You know, there's things that you can do. You can change how you threw the shot from the last time to make them think that it's going to make it a little bit different, and so it's harder for them to like instantly correct. So one of the things that I used to do quite a bit is from like extreme range. You know, I would like throw like a kind of a flat outside wrap like to the hand, you know, and then they catch that block, right? So the next time, then I'd throw it, you know, like this, and the timing of that shot is a little bit different. So their hand doesn't move, you know, doesn't have to move the same way to block that. But there's a slight difference in there, but the big difference is where they can return to from here. You know, like he can return to the inside hand, and he's like, oh, I can't really reach for that, right? So then if I throw here, but I leave my hand in place, now they'll be like, oh, there's an outside lane, and then they'll reach for it.
And then you can punish them when that happens.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, like you can make subtle changes in distance, or subtle changes how you throw the swing, where you step. Instead of stepping here, you know, you step here and throw it. Things like that.
Okay.
How you lead into things.
Okay. So basically, like you can essentially throw what looks like the same shot, but you're throwing it in like at a slightly different angle, or you know, like at first, like you just threw a flat, and then you like did the
open,
the open hand.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, being able to throw something that looks very similar from an opener standpoint or from an opening standpoint, and then turns into something that hits in a different location is the entire basis of feinting.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, a good feint is one that if your opponent doesn't block it, will hit them. Right. So if I'm throwing down here, I could be throwing cross. Okay. I could be throwing a shoulder chop. I could actually be, if he's far enough to the outside here, I could be throwing this. But it all starts by doing that. Okay. So I'm doing a number of different things, and now depending on what he's going to read it as, he's probably going to anticipate, he's like, well, he's hit me in the shoulder by doing that twice, so he's going to come up and block his shoulder. And then I can actually just break over.
Okay.
Or, you know, if he's decided that what I'm doing when I'm doing this is I'm throwing this inside wrap, then he's going to just twist his wrist in probably, right? So instead I can come here and come underneath, and I can actually keep reasonably safe while doing that because he didn't move his hand far enough across. So it's all really just setting up with things that look like the same opening and that have multiple things that you can morph into, and then you just pick whatever one they didn't choose.
Okay.
It's like a choose your own adventure book where everything ends in death.
Don't they always?
Yeah, isn't that everyone?
Yeah. Well, you know, I'll throw a lot of repeated shots, like gimme shots, to see how people react. I throw this like, especially when I'm dropped down to single sword, I throw this kind of like lazier, like chop to the inside wrist, just to see how people react, especially with like a big step. You know, to see him how he moves that hand. Because if he moves that hand again next time I do it, you know, I'm gonna hit him on the outside instead.
Okay.
Because it's the same, like, it looks like the same thing's coming in.
But you just turned your hand over.
Yeah, but I just turned my hand over. But you know, this is extremely safe. Even if he's got two swords, my sword is still pretty much as good a position as it could be for where his hands are. You know, so it's extremely safe to kind of fish him out. You know, like it's the sort of thing like if I see him like itch like he wants to throw, but he just doesn't quite do it. You know, maybe this time instead of stepping away, you know, like I'll stay a little bit closer, so that he does go for it. So now I have access, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then
Okay.
if he is single sword, he's going to jump the hell away before I can finish swinging with the sword.
Yeah.
Right. So you'd throw that shot while you were backing up.
Yeah, I'd throw it, and then I'd immediately be moving this hand and laying over here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, whenever you're down to single sword against someone who's Florentine, you're doing almost all of your defense with your feet.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're doing the vast majority of the defense of your body, Florentine, with your feet.
Right.
In any case, but when you get dropped down to two sword, like one single sword from two sword against another two sword, your feet have to be extremely active
Yeah.
against any full kit, whether it's board or two sword or.
Yeah.
It's a little easier against someone who only has one weapon because you can sometimes do something like, especially if you're down offhand, and so you're essentially hand mashed. If you can get him to throw to the outside, you can sometimes catch him and do this. But against a Florentiner or a two-sword guy, even if I get him to do that, and even if I hit him, he's probably still killed me and I've armed him. I mean, I could feel better about it, I guess, but I'm still dead and I'm still lost.
Yeah.
So it's very important for me to not get greedy if I'm single sword against the two sword guy, and it's very important for me to attempt to even the odds before I do anything else.
Yeah.
So in that situation, where he got me to throw out, right? I got this hand here. So say instead of like really going like deep for my arm, like he might throw to my arm, right? So that I throw with this hand, so that he can block it and return to this arm, while keeping that hand in between this weapon the whole time.
Ah.
See what I mean?
So he made you think he was going for your right arm when really his target was your left arm all along.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I mean, I take whatever arm I can get. It's just I need to deal with his other sword before I can attack.
You're supposed to say that was part of the plan.
No, take what you can get safely.
Yeah.
That
It's
is
all
the
about,
plan.
It's all about being safe.
Okay.
Right?
Safety first, kids.
Safety first. Welcome to the Boy Scout team.
I thought that was be prepared.
Always be prepared.
Be safe.
Not cookies, I think.
Possibly ABC. Always be closing.
That's the next class.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.